All right, FightHype.com, Sean Zattel. Proud to be joined by the two-division champion of the world, the Magic Man, Paulie Malignaggi. Sicily's in the house, Brooklyn's in the house.
Yeah.
Bensonhurst is in the house.
Everybody's in Vegas for this week. Everybody's in the house this week. It's Canelo Plant Fight Week.
Are you enjoying? I mean, it's just the first day, but are you enjoying being back on the other side of the aisle, being media? You got to talk with Canelo today.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. You know, something to do, and it's a nice, exciting fight week. So you do get excited to get in there, and sometimes you say like, you know, when you're away from it, you're like kind of get used to being away from it. You kind of get used to just, you know, it becomes whatever, you know. But then when you get back in it, you're like, oh man, you know, it's, you know, you realize like, oh, you kind of miss it, you know. You kind of, you know, it's fun to be back in there, you know. I think we're just creatures of habit. We can get used to anything if we're in or out of it long enough. You know, I was kind of used to not being around the fights, and I was fine, but it's cool, you know. You're back in here. You see this big fight week, you know, and you see the excitement on the fighters and the focus on the fighters, and you know, everybody just a buzz. It's cool.
It's great just to have you back, Paulie, and that
awesome.
Great boxing brain.
Awesome.
Well, what were you and Canelo talking about?
I was just basically, you know, everybody has like pretty basic questions, and I'm sure they hear the same question. That was one of the things that on my fight weeks I kind of always, you know, not was annoyed about, but you know, you kind of had to. It was like you were playing the tape on repeat a lot of times. Everybody kind of had very similar, same questions. So I kind of went to try to give them something different, and I basically asked them, you know, something that for me was personally experienced when I fought Miguel Cotto, and that is, you know, you got a guy who's used to big fights, and then you're coming in not so used to big fights. You know, obviously with Canelo and Caleb's been in big fights, but all of Canelo's opponents have never been in a fight as big as the one with Canelo. Canelo is the biggest fight for them, you know, and it's the biggest magnitude, it's the biggest buzz, the most enthusiasm, but also the most anxiety, you know. So I asked him, does he notice that? As he started to notice, because now he's a veteran of the game, you know, and does he notice that it's, you know, it's a situation where it's more normal for him, you know. You can kind of see the edge on the opponents. Sometimes the edge is good because they're all coming in as underdogs, so being on edge sometimes is good because you want to prove everybody wrong. I'm not saying Caleb is wrong by feeling that, but there is an edge to the opponent all the time, and Canelo, it seems like no matter how big the fight is, it's kind of business as usual. It reminds me of when Floyd was in all the big fights and all the opponents were finally stepping up to Floyd. And it's funny because, you know, people say, oh, Floyd and Canelo kind of have had differences and whatnot, but Canelo gave Floyd credit in that way. He said, you know, it was my experience with Floyd. You know, Floyd had all the big fights, and he had you know, all the experience, and he was used to the big moment, the big arena, the big buzz, the big enthusiasm of fight week, and I wasn't. He said, you know, and I kind of had to, you know, get used to that, and it affects you a little bit, you know. So I feel like, you know, I needed to get his opinion on that, just to see if he noticed it. Because sometimes when you're on the inside, you don't notice some things until you step back out on the outside, you know. And for me personally, it's something that you see early on in the fight, because that's when you're on your highest emotions. And if it's a bigger fight than normal, those early rounds, it's hard to settle into, you know. You need to get past those early rounds to settle into the fight, you know. Some guys don't. So.
Well, he's expected to, by some experts, to get off to a good start in the early rounds. Planners.
Yeah.
Do you think so?
That's the thing. I mean, usually you would think so, but you got to keep the nerves in check. I think Caleb has the ability to get off to a good start. I really do. I think he's overall a very smooth boxer and has the ability to get off to a good start. Especially he's longer with the jab. As long as his legs are strong, and early on your legs are strong, you can move around, maneuver, and keep that distance. So I wouldn't be surprised if Caleb got off to an early good start. But again, if his emotions are not in check, you end up with problems right away. I can remember the Cotto fight, man. My emotions were not in check. I could have really took advantage of the early rounds and my freshness and my fast legs and stuff like that, but I found myself battling in the early rounds to get out of them before I finally settled into the fight. So you know, before you know it, you're kind of digging yourself out of a hole, and I feel like Billy Joe Saunders did that too. He never really settled into the fight with Canelo. I felt like he was throwing left hands from too far away the whole time. He never could find his distance, and eventually, you know, that discomfort, you know, even when he was landing on the end of the shots instead of right at the meat of the shots. And even by the end of the fight, throwing that left hand from too far away actually is what got his orbital bone broke. It was a counter. Canelo countered that left hand that came up short. So you know, again, it's sometimes it's not easy to get it to settle into the fight because you're not just dealing with an emotional situation. You're dealing with a world-class fighter. You know,
does that come from
on many people's lists? He's #1 pound for pound. So you know, you're dealing with a two-edged sword there.
You said you felt he was throwing them from too far out. Does that have to do with fear?
It has to do with anxiety.
Yeah.
And anxiety, because you can't settle into the fight. You can't find your distance, and so you can't find your distance. You're kind of anxious at that distance. Yeah, fear was always part of it. There's fear in every fighter. It's just depending on how you're controlling it and fearing it, and feeling your way into the fight with it. But you know, there's fear and anxiety in every fighter, no matter what. You know that those early rounds, you know, you're kind of dealing with that and using that as positive energy for yourself if you can get to it. There's a tightness there that comes sometimes, and you can't step into that. And if you feel tight, if you feel anxious, you're not going to smoothly transition the distance to the punching range that you want to be at to fight, to punch, because your nerves are making you so anxious. You're tight, and you're going to not disguise the entrance into the punch zone correctly. And if you don't disguise the entrance into the punch zone correctly, you're going to walk into a shot. So if you feel tight, you're not going to trust yourself to close that gap, because you feel like you're not going to disguise it the right way. And I feel like that's what Billy Joel's problem was. He didn't feel confident enough to disguise the entrance the right way, when usually he did. You know, usually in all his other fights, he was a guy who was a master at that, right? And I think it's not just the anxiety. You got to give Canelo Alvarez credit, but Canelo Alvarez eventually paid to pay for it, that's for sure. You
know, speaking of Saunders, do you feel that, Paulie, Plant is a better fighter and tougher challenge than Saunders at 168?
Not necessarily. I think they're both very good fighters. I think Saunders was dealt with the way he was dealt with, but you know, Canelo was ready for him, and I think Saunders, one way or another, couldn't give his best. You know, I don't think it was the way I saw Saunders early in that fight. I had seen him much better, even in tough situations like the Lemieux fight where it was a tough crowd. But you know, he was fearless. You know, I didn't see a fearless guy in there, and that's not a knock on Saunders. You know, there's a lot you're dealing with. 80,000 people in that Texas stadium. You know, and
they're all Mexican.
Yeah, and so you know, I didn't feel like he was able to control himself to show the best of him. But that's also on Canelo. Canelo's bringing that. Canelo's bringing that whole atmosphere. You're not just dealing with Canelo inside the ring. You're dealing with Canelo outside the ring. He's bringing everything to you. You know, you're bringing the atmosphere and the anxiety and everything else. So in dealing with Canelo, you can't just, when you got a fighter that you talk about, okay, he's got to deal with Canelo, and you mix X's and O's, and you talk about X's and O's, you've also got to include the intangibles when you're dealing with a fighter like Canelo, because he's got such a high popularity that he's going to bring those intangibles, like an incredibly big fight week, an incredibly high decibel level crowd on fight night, where even if a shot misses you, they're going through the roof, you know. And there's a lot more anxiety to control on that fight week. And sometimes if you can't control that anxiety, you don't even get to the point of mixing your best X's and O's with Canelo's best X's and O's. It doesn't even get to that point, you know. And I don't think Saunders ever got to that point. So it was Canelo's best X's and O's, and Saunders was kind of just tight, and he never settled into the fight.
I remember you saying back Canelo Triple G won back in 2017. Triple G's clearly winning this fight, and it seems like he's gotten. How much better has Canelo gotten since that point and impressed you, Paulie?
He's gotten better. I think we all get better with experience, right? I mean, I think he's gotten better. But I also don't think he's fought somebody as good as Golovkin was at that time. You know,
I think that's had something to do with it.
Golovkin, like Canelo, is a once-in-a-generation type of fighter. I mean, they just happen to come across each other and made for, you know, a nice rivalry. But I don't know, man. A prime Golovkin against everybody Canelo's fought thus far since then, I don't know, man. That's the best fighter Canelo fought in his career, Golovkin.
How much would you say?
And I don't know that it matters anymore, because Golovkin's not the same fighter. You know, he's not going to be the same fighter. So you can't even make that fight again. You know, that was just that particular fight and at that particular time. You know, Prime Golovkin was very scary to deal with. Very, very scary to deal with. That's it. So I can describe that to you. So I think Canelo's gotten better, but I don't think you can make comparisons. Every style is different, and all these fighters are world class. Just because you don't have to be Golovkin to be world class, but every fighter is world class that Canelo has fought. But I still rate Golovkin as probably the best of those that he's fought in that Golovkin time, in that time since Golovkin.
Would you say it's like 50-50? 50% is his improvements as a fighter, and 50 is the caliber of op, or more so one way or the other?
No, I'd say it's probably, you're not going to get the exact percentage breakdown because you're you're dealing with different styles in front of you. The way you're adjusting to this guy might be a different way than the way you adjust to this guy instead, because these two guys might have different styles. So it's not that. I just feel like he's seen all the styles and he kind of knows how to deal with all the styles, and that's good. I don't even think Kovalev, even though he's a big Eastern European guy, was like Golovkin. I think Kovalev. I think he was timid by that point in his career. And he was okay. I thought he fought well, but eventually Canelo got him out of there. And do I think the Golovkin experience helped Canelo with dealing with Kovalev? Yes, absolutely. I think you go through those kind of fights, you do become a better fighter just by having gone through them. But I still think Golovkin was better. I still think Golovkin has a different quality than those guys who again are all world class. And not a knock on the opposition. They're still world class.
Say he wins Saturday night. He's the favorite. Where does he rank on Paulie's greatest Mexicans fighter? Is he better than Chavez to you?
I feel like it's blasphemy to say anybody's better than Chavez, right? But man, he's getting up there, right? He's starting to get up there. I can remember when Cotto was first winning fights and everybody was ranking the Puerto Rican list, and everybody thought it was a blasphemy when it was ranking him ahead of Trinidad. But I think by the end of his career, I think you have a pretty good say that Cotto could have surpassed Trinidad, right? So it's
only 4-division champ from Puerto Rico, as Canelo is in Mexico, right?
I think that's one for the Mexicans, just like that other argument is one for the Puerto Ricans. I think you stay out of that one, man.
Just like we got to argue Lamada and Marciano.
Exactly.
That's for us.
So I think either way, it's a good argument to have if you're a Canelo fan, or if you're a Mexican fighter in general, because there's a lot of pride, a lot to be proud of there.
Now, when you talk to fighters and trainers, they don't make too much of press. That's more what we do and fans do. But is there any chance, Paulie, that Canelo took something from Plant or has an edge mentally because of what happened in L.A. in that press conference?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. It's great. It's great fodder. It's great. Gossip fodder for sure. But I don't think so. I think both guys. If anything, it affected Caleb's training because he probably couldn't spar for a couple weeks, right? So, but other than that, I don't think there's anything to take anything out of that. You got two guys that want to get at each other. That's it. That's all I see.
And just lastly on Canelo Plant, Paulie, seems like the consensus is Canelo late KO. He's saying 8 rounds. What says you?
I'm not gonna go out and make a prediction. No.
Okay.
But I think that if you see Canelo winning the fight, I think you probably see it mid to late rounds KO. If you see Caleb winning the fight, I see a Caleb giving a boxing exhibition and using Canelo's slower feet against him. But I don't. It's hard for me to see Canelo winning by decision.
Really?
But I think if Canelo has the advantage in the fight, Caleb probably doesn't last that long, because Canelo's not the kind of guy. Canelo hits so hard; he's not the kind of guy that's going to beat you up. You're probably just going to get taken out of the fight, if he's beating you up. It's too hard. You're probably going to get stopped. I don't think you can be in a vigilant, show a lot of heart type of fight with Canelo. Because for one, he's not busy. Canelo's not the busiest guy in there, so he's not going to give you a total beating. And number two, I think he hits too hard. So when he does start to land, you're probably just gonna end the fight. The fight's gonna be over. So for that reason, I don't see it going the distance if Canelo wins the fight. But at the same time, I find it hard to see if Caleb would stop Canelo too. I think Caleb couldn't win by decision, which then of course begs the question, can he get a decision, right? I mean, it's a whole other can of worms there.
There's some things at play that maybe he can. You know, this is Canelo's first PBC fight. And Caleb's the PBC guy. He's
that's possible.
maybe marketable for reasons.
We'll see. We'll see Saturday night. I'll be watching the same fight you guys are watching.